everyone, welcome back to another episode of Grassroots Racer. Today I speak to someone who is quite interesting because he did quite a big change in motorsport, which some people, you wouldn't really expect it. So I'll let you guys find that out by watching the episode. But it's really interesting to talk to Josh. Josh is such a great guy, and it was a good chat. And I'd also just like to take the opportunity to quickly thank all my sponsors and supporters. It's been an absolute honor to speak to so many different people involved in motorsport, and I couldn't ask for anything different. And honestly, thank you to all my sponsors. Truly, they stick with me through the lows and the highs, and I promise in the future there will be some highs coming. So, guys, thank you so much for all your support, and enjoy this episode of Grassroots Racer.
Okay, so thanks, Josh, for joining the podcast today. Let's dive right in. How did you start in grassroots racing, and what drew you both to the dirt track, sprint cars, and the asphalt, Formula Ford?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, when I was probably 13, that's when I started out in karting, racing in the J's, and I raced karts all the way till 18, till I was about 17, 18, through the Rotax classes. I'm fourth generation motorsport though, so with the family always coming from the asphalt racing, that's what drew us to that. It was the safe haven, it's what we knew. So we stuck to that, and we sort of got to the stage like we'd always go to the speedway down at Parramatta and watching stuff, but it was one of those things. I always wanted to do speedway, but no one that I knew anything about it. So it was a bit of a, you got a passion in it, but you better stick into what you know. We're looking at it because it was a bit cheaper at the time than running Formula Ford. It always seemed out of reach to race Formula Ford when it was at its peak because there's just so much money in it. So I sort of assumed that I was never going to quite be able to crack into there. And I was lucky enough to eventually find the Kent class and managed to get myself a Kent. And then, I've done that for the period of time. And then I ended up sort of just getting to a stage where I probably had to start really looking into the car and upgrading and seeing what I could have done and spending money. So there was about that time where I thought, well, it might be time to make the change. And when you look at all the other categories after Kent, as you'd know, it's pretty hefty in the price jump between going from, these Kents and to anything else. So I went through absolutely every option that I could go through. Spoke to some blokes that I knew that had raced speedway and, sort of pick their minds a bit and see what they think. And that's when we thought, well, if we never have a go, we'll never know how good we are. So it's, just jump in and see what happens.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's the attitude you got to have. But the Kents are a really good class to start off with. So you may or may not know, but I race Formula V. So that's almost that and Excels are considered the cheapest form of motorsport, I guess, in state series level. It's great stuff, honestly. What did you think of the Kents when you drove them? Or did you ever test a Duratec?
No, so I never got the luxury of going into a Duratec. It's probably something I would, if I still had the chance, I'd still probably do. As for any other form of racing, I'm just happy to be driving a car more than anything. And the main thing is just making sure I can get in one. So I'll just take whatever I can get. But no, I never got the chance of it, but I really did like the Kent. My dad raced Formula V, so he's the one that sort of told me and sort of pushed the Kent fact forward just because he said they're just a little bit, everyone that he knew that had the transition from a V to a Kent just said it's not heaps different. It's just a bit more comfortable, not having a torsion bar suspension and, having coilovers and stuff. So a bit more pointier in the way they steer. So no, it was especially out of going from karts into Kents, it was like a dream come true. It was like, this is racing. I'm in a proper, racecraft and, cutting laps in a Formula Ford, which was always the initial goal. So no, I was just loving every minute of it. And yeah.
So what sort of series did you do? Did you do lots of track days or did you do state series?
Yeah, so we ran probably a handful of practice days at Wakefield when it was still open, maybe only 2 or 3. And then, then it sort of timed with the start of the New South Wales State Series. So then, we made sure we ran every round of them. And then it was sort of hard because it was sort of around that COVID time where it was, could only have so many people at the track and trying to learn how to and talk to new people about, what it takes to drive one of these things, and you can't even get within 2 meters of them. But as time went on, we sort of nutted it out, and basically just stayed with state series unless it clashed with an Australian round in New South Wales.
Yeah, fair enough. That's sort of what we're aiming to do as well. With the Formula V, we're just aiming to race every round that we can. And it's a lot of fun. I have a similar mindset to you. As long as I'm in a car, I'm having fun. That's the goal of racing. But they can seem like an awesome category, which I'd love to drive one day. Have you ever tested a V, just before I go any further, or not?
No, I haven't.
So you said your dad raced Formula V?
Yeah, back when they were 1200s. So, he raced through the 90s basically, and then, then I came around and had to pull up stumps a bit, and then it wasn't until we got back in the karts that we got the motorsport all clicking over again.
Yeah. So the Formula Vs, from experience, they're quite a tail-happy car. You're always chasing the rear, even though they haven't got a lot of power. Do you sort of notice in the Kent, when you plant the throttle, does it have grip all the time? And when you're in a medium to high-speed corner, does it ever sort of drift, like the rear end step out, or has it always got grip?
Yeah, it's sort of a weird one, because I was always getting told to chase. When I did any form of driver coaching and stuff, they sort of said, you want it in the cockpit, it wants to look out of control, but from the outside, you want to look like you're in control. So it's sort of like getting like a power slide going. You sort of want it all to, in any of those low horsepower categories, corner speed's vital. You can't afford to be too taily or understeering, because, every 0.1 of a second around a lap, is going to add up by the time you get to the start-finish line. So, no, I was just, more so just trying to find those margins to get, if it is going to slide, you want it to slide pretty evenly, so we could, just carry all the speed through the corner.
Yeah, that's sort of the goal when you're racing something with low horsepower. You got to try and make up all the corner speed, like you said. But, switching between asphalt and dirt is no small change. It's quite a different change. So how do you sort of mentally and physically prepare for the distinct differences? Sort of, it's a bit hard to explain. So I do a bit of rally, and you got to switch your mind to you're racing on dirt. How hard did you find it at first?
Weirdly enough, dirt racing's probably come more natural to me than all the learning I've had to do to be faster on the asphalt. I had other times in karting where I had to go in speedway karts and being on dirt a bit, and knew what it'd be like to slide the racecraft. But the difference is with any form of midget, sprint car, late model, whatever it is, they're set up to do it. Like, if you get that set up right, you can pretty much drive it without your hands, and it should be trying to turn itself, into the corner, and then you're just trying to catch it. So, I never sort of went through that stage of, G'ing myself up or overhyping it, or it was just, rightio, it's a new thing, we'll have a crack. And then as we've just kept doing laps from here on in, it only obviously gets more comfortable the more you do it. So we're at a pretty good stage now where it's, you don't get anxious or anything. You just hop in the car and, your job's to get up the front.
So when you jumped in a sprint car, what's sort of the budget for, so speedway racing, obviously you've got your late models, saloon cars, like sort of every category. You got all your categories. What's the budget sort of between running on your own in a sprint car and running up the front? Is there a huge difference in how much you're spending?
Yeah, well, off the top of my head, I know the sprint car guys, they're spending at the front ridiculous money. It's a quick way to get poor. What I race, like the one behind me, is a compact speed car. So compared to a standard midget, it's instead of running a 4-cylinder car motor, basically, any of the E-slingers or anything like that, it's actually got a bike motor in it. So it's got mine's got a ZX10 in it, but anything with a 1 litre. Still running on methanol and creating pretty good power, but we're still probably 100 or so shy of what a full-blown midget would run. So when you're running these sort of categories, when we made the jump to speedway, I was still trying to find something that was cost-effective, so that whilst I'm running it myself, I can afford to run it at the best of my ability. I didn't want to go into a class where I'd be, the best I could do is mid-pack, because that's what the budget allows me to do. I wanted to find a category that would allow me to go to my limits, and that way we could, race for the lead. So, yeah, it was tossing up between this, wingless. I've always liked the open wheelers, so it was always mainly just looking at those categories, and I always liked midget racing, so it just so happened that the right one came up at the right time. And when I was talking to the guys at the Compact Speed Car Club, they were like beyond helpful, like on trying to help me get into it, and even find me a car and go from there. So it's been really good once we got the hand in. And the price for these things aren't silly. Like in the weight compared to bitumen racing, just a race itself is heaps cheaper. Like you don't have big entry fees like you do to be on the tarmac, so it helps there. The other reason too of looking at speedway was we had more tracks. We're getting to the stage when Wakefield went down and we only had Sydney Motorsport Park. I was a bit like, well, I was always wanting to go interstate with the Kent, but it was just really stretching the budget. So just finding those other categories that I could run that had more racing. It was better for my sponsors too, in the way of just exposure. There's generally found more people to be at a local speedway race than what we had at a New South Wales State Round 2. So, that's sort of where we got to.
It was quite unfortunate that Wakefield shut down for that period of time, because now it's got this new owner and it's coming back as one raceway. But it's Sydney's still only got 2 tracks that you can virtually race on all the time. Because Bathurst you can only race once in a blue moon, and they don't do Kents anymore.
No, that's exactly right.
Did they even do Formula Ford anymore? Maybe.
A couple of years ago they did do a run there, and mainly for the historics, but they did invite a couple Kents. But it's sort of by invite and depending what's going on, sort of thing. So it's not really a state round either. It's its own event, sort of, when it comes on.
So it's still, you've only really got 2 tracks.
More or less. And once Wakefield opens up, there are ones coming up around Newcastle area and stuff that are under construction and stuff, but whether they're just for test days or what, I'm not 100% yet, but hopefully they're not, and they're full-blown racetracks, and we can get some more racing happening around the state and country.
Yeah, because I suppose it's not horrible to go to Winton if you're southern New South Wales, but if you're just even if you're just in New South Wales, it's still hard to get to Winton.
But Winton was probably the best out of all of them. Obviously, it's logistically closer. Like doing the travel for motorsport never bothered me. To me, it's just a part of the sport. Like, if all my races were out of Broken Hill, I'd be driving to Broken Hill. Like, it just would be what it would be. But it's just sort of getting the timing right and making sure I had the car right for the time. I didn't want to go all the way down there for a test day, basically. I wanted to have a package that I went, rightio, it'll be fairly competitive. Especially, you've got your 3 days, so that Friday practice is pretty vital when you've gone to a new track, to make sure that your Saturday and Sundays, clean racing and, the car's ready to go. So, it's just one of those things that came up when it came to the logistics of the sport too.
Yeah. So, obviously, you're in the midget now, correct? Yeah, okay. So, I'm not 100% on Speedway. So, you're in the midget now. How much setup did you have to do when you bought it? Like, did you do a bit of R&D to it, or did you sort of leave it outrun?
The difference is, when I started Kent's, we sort of just bought a car that we could get and then spent a lot of time working it and to tailor it to how I liked it, and went from there. This time around, I sort of went, rightio, a good package came up basically with a team sellout. So I just bit the bullet, did it. So I had, I've got setup charts, I've got the car itself, I've got spares, engines, I had the lot. So the difference this time is I sort of came in better equipped than I did when I was first coming into Formula Ford. And then, the rest was just learning the subtle differences to how you tune a car for dirt and a track that changes every lap that you come around.
Yeah. That's when I talk to people who race speedway, that's sort of the number one thing is trying to tailor the setup for the track because it changes virtually every lap, and from one session it can change heaps.
Yeah, so example, we were at Goulburn on the weekend that just gone, and yeah, our first heat, the track was as wet as it could possibly be. It was so much, we had so much understeer, we were looking at the fence most of the time, and then by the final it was hard slick, and then it ended up being choppy and rough by the end. So yeah, it's sort of just preempting what you think is going to happen and keep watching that track through the night when you're not in the car. Quick, I'm constantly running back up to the track, just seeing what it's doing, thinking what I can do to get the car's best performance for that heat or final, just to make sure that we're there or thereabouts.
So I've got a question that will lead on to another question. What's the track you're at the most in the midget?
Well, I haven't done the same one twice yet.
Okay.
Our calendar's pretty good and spread this year. If Sydney didn't have the issues at the moment with not being open, we'd be at Sydney for the majority of the races at Eastern Creek there at the new complex. But yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we'll be racing there this year. So yeah, we've been all over the place between Goulburn, Cullambullen, Lismore's on the cards, ACT, and then you've also got, your interstate rounds as well. If you're a keen racer and you can go every weekend, you can pretty much make a hobby of it.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, if you go to the same track multiple times, can you sort of predict what it's going to do over a night?
I probably haven't done it long enough
to
answer that well enough. I have been to, say, Cullen twice. The main advantage was I had a rough idea how I was already going to gear the car up and a shop setup, basically, of what I was going to come with to start with before the adjustments. But, for example, with Cullen, the 2 times I went, the first time was heaps choppy. The second time was one of the best tracks it could possibly be. It was flat. It was fast. You could race 2-3 wide. It was completely the opposite of what it was last time. But then some of the other things, like I said, with gearing and the setup, I didn't change too much. So, yeah, it still helps, obviously. And it's more just getting the seat time. It doesn't really matter what track I'm at. It's just making sure I'm in the car as much as I can, because then learning to read the track's the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's it's always important because you've only how long you really got? You've only really got the first practice session in sort of anything you ever do to get the track, to get a base idea of the track.
Yeah, well, that's it. Sometimes you go to the track for your first time, and the first time you put the car on it is your heat one. So, but you know what you've got to do when you're in the car. It's no different from taking a tarmac car to another track. It's just a different shape.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And you can sort of not necessarily have the best package for that time, but you can always drive through it, or find a way and then make your adjustments. It's just, I think the difference with the speedway, it's a bit more like karts. It's heaps faster. You don't have as much time between heats, in between races, compared to, Formula Ford, where you're only doing a quali in a race one day and 2 races the next. You're just congesting that into a 4 or 5 hour period. So it's just trying to make sure you also keep your nose clean so you got a car for the final.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed about speedway is everyone sets their car up for the final if they know they can get there. So if they've got a front running car, I know a few guys set their car up for the final. They're trying to set up ahead, but focus on a good car for the main race, and then they just try and get there through the other ones.
Yeah, it sort of just depends how you draw and stuff too, and everyone will be different. There would be people that, the final would be everything. There's people that want to grab easy points through the heats. I'm not sure if the different clubs point score differently, or if they, we point score through everything. So it's not just the final that counts. You get more points, but you've got all those other steps and races to make. So, and it's still a good way to test the car in different conditions too and get a feel. And more or less, for what we found so far, is as long as you're within that window of where you need to be, your tunes aren't over the top. It's all just little tunes to whatever the track's doing. It's not,
Yeah.
anything too major.
As a general rule, if you're messing about with a car, what are some changes you'd make, like tire pressure? Do you do toe in, toe out? Like, what are some general things people do?
So the main one for speedway is your stagger, the difference between your rear ride and your left rear, because that's what's going to enable you to turn. But the camber of the track pays effect in that, amongst other things. Your wheel widths, a bit like a kart with the spacers, your width is. That's all the stuff you play with in the way of bringing the back in or out, depending on what the track's doing. Changing your staggers if you feel like it needs turning. But just like a normal car, you've still got your caster adjustments if you want to make the turning easier, or you're happy to fight on the straight lines to make it a bit easier to steer. It's just it's not really heaps different. It's still a car at the end of the day. It's just different, ground.
Yeah, fair enough. And sort of, do you change shocks between races, or depending on what track you're at?
So I've got adjustable shocks on mine. So the shocks themselves I can stiffen or soften throughout the night. Some people even run the cables all the way up into the cockpit so they can do it on the fly if they need to under a safety car or something, depending if they feel like it, what it's doing. So I've been pretty lucky with that. I know other people, they'll bring an array of shocks to soften it or stiffen it or do whatever they're trying to achieve throughout the night. That's just personal preference, same as your springs and tensions and running helpers as well. So,
well, obviously, yeah, you can probably tell that I've got no idea about speedway. But what are some career highlights that you've sort of gone through so far? Even in the Kents, just through sort of your career.
In the way of the Kents, in our first year we managed to get second in the championship. It was more for being consistent than necessarily being the best, but in racing you got to make your own luck, and sometimes you got to take that when you can get it, because there's other times that you go for it and you could lunch a motor and that's your season. So probably in the way of the actual speedway though, the season's only just started as it runs over the summer period. First round at Cullen we managed to get second, which was pretty good. That was pretty much our first race. We'd done one other prior, but it was only really just a test to see what it was like. So this season's our actual first season running on the dirt, and so far we're sitting second in the championship. And if we can stay there or thereabouts, I'll take that with a fair bit of pride.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you jump into a series for the first time, sometimes I know I found it hard when I jumped into Formula V to sort of get used to how everyone else drove, because you got to pick out your drivers, how certain people drive. So when you inevitably come up on them or they're behind you, you can sort of figure out how they're going to drive.
Yeah, well, it's the same sort of thing. Obviously, the first time you go out, you don't know anyone. You're just guessing and hoping that, I think the weirdest thing, I guess, the first time was when you're sliding, you're trusting that they're going to slide with you. Because if they cut back in front of you or something goes wrong, you don't necessarily have the capabilities of just pulling it up. But I think that's a good thing, because you've got so many heat races before that final. You've seen more or less what people do in them to preempt what they're like in the final. And then obviously the more you race and you see the same faces over and over again, then you start knowing how people drive. So,
yeah. I've got a quick question. It's a bit random, but have you done iRacing, the midgets on iRacing?
Nah, I wouldn't mind doing it, but
Yeah.
sort of up into the real thing, and then all my other, ambitions I can't afford. So
Yeah, it's fair enough.
yeah, but no, it would be something like if I could get a decent setup, I'd do it. But besides doing it with an Xbox controller, don't have much of the other simulator stuff.
That's fair enough. Yeah, my sim's nothing special. It's like, I think bought the wheel and pedals for $50. Bought the chassis, like not the chassis, but the rig for $200, and then the computer I've just developed over time, so it's probably worth $1,200. But Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's what
called
I
a
think.
cheap setup. It's still quite
Yeah, well,
expensive though.
yeah, well, when I actually started in Kent, I actually got put on to doing some simulation training to as my driver coaching, and that was probably actually pretty good. It's once I managed to actually train my brain into the fact that it wasn't a video game and you got to still treat it like it's an actual car, because it pretty much was. Obviously, you couldn't just brake a meter out of the corner. Um, it probably actually did give me the best tips in the way of just learning the foot control.
Yep.
You know, the brake pressures coming off it, coming back onto the throttle. So, no, it's still something I still think's a great thing. It's just, yeah, in the way of owning one myself, I don't have one.
Well, I do see it as a good tool, but sometimes you can find yourself it doesn't really help. But I learned how to heel and toe on it when I was 12. I taught myself how to
Yeah,
heel and toe on it, but it's a bit different for everyone. I guess you see
yeah,
people like Brody Kostecki, he's sort of come from it all.
yeah,
But
yeah. I think it's just, different strokes, different folks. Like,
mm,
some people will adapt to it both. Some people are good at one, not the other. Just, yeah, pick of the bunch.
yeah, I'm better in the real thing.
Yeah, I think I am too.
Yeah, I jumped in the 410s once, and I ended up doing monos half the time.
Yeah, well,
So,
they're just a crazy machine. I don't even
mm,
know how it'd go. One of the times I was at the speedway, I was helping one of the guys in the pits before I started racing speedway myself, and I was sitting up on the fence at the new Eastern Creek Speedway watching the sprint cars, and they're crazy machines when you get to their level, like
yeah,
the actual speed and power of them, and to be able to control them for that period of times. Yeah, pretty immense,
yeah, and
pretty humbling stuff.
yeah, you're still quite early in your racing career. So, what would you say? What are your goals for the future? Obviously, you want to continue the season in the midgets, but where's the ultimate goal?
Yeah, so I'm sort of going pretty attached to dirt. That's not to say I'd never go back to the tarmac, but um, yeah, if I can keep racing these at a good caliber and try to, win a championship in one of my own cars, that would be, a short term goal. And then yeah, obviously if you can ever pinch yourself a drive in a full blown midget or a sprint car or a late model, you're laughing. So it's, just chipping away and still learning. Like, you know, I'm versing people that have done it for absolute years and they're still learning. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's just taking it race by race and trying to harness as much information as I can gather and you know take it one step at a time.
I think that's the best approach when you're sort of when you're at just in motorsport in general. When you're trying to develop your own car, you've really got to just take it one step at a time. Make sure everything's calculated, I guess you could say. Um,
Yeah,
and just making sure that it's going to be sustainable for the future. Just making sure that what you're working on.
a kid, and I first started karts.
Mm,
And I was like adamant, like, I was a hardcore Michael Schumacher fan, and I was like, that's it. I'm going to hop in this thing, and I'm absolutely going to tear up, and I'm going to win all these trophies. And I was adamant, and I was 10 seconds off the pace, like, and it just took, like, that was my first time in one. But then over time, obviously, I've chipped my way up. But yeah, just coming in with the arrogance of thinking you're going to take them out first go, sort of figured as I got older, you got to take it one step at a time. Because if you start looking too far in the future, you're missing good points to be made in the present sort of thing. So,
yeah, 100%. But with the not thinking too far ahead though. But would you like to one day potentially go over to America and race, in sprint cars? But I'm guessing sort of from your mentality, whatever comes along, you'll take.
yeah, 100%. If the offer knocked on my door as soon as we finished this and said, you want to come to the States and race sprint cars, I'd be halfway hanging out the door. Like, yeah, there's no doubt if the opportunities come, I'm not going to knock them back. But it's just, at the same time, knowing where I'm at in my especially speedway career and understanding that, if I can actually prove that I can do things in this, well, then I'll prove to everyone else that I could do it in other people's machinery.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a cool feeling when even when you're in your own machinery and it's not at the budget of the front guys and you're up there with them. I've experienced that and it's such a good feeling.
I feel like it makes you a better driver too, because if you're doing your own work on the car, so you understand, if the car's feeling taily or it's understeering or it's, not doing what you want to do, whatever it be, and you know those adjustments to make, I feel like that makes you a lot better of a driver than just being able to hop in a seat and drive it. It's hard to get feedback if you don't know why it's, doing what it's doing. So, yeah, I think I like that bit. And it's a bit of a hobby too when I'm not at the track to be able to just, come in the garage and tinker on the car and see what I can do to make it better.
Yeah. Well, like for example, you've probably do the same, but I've got a few mates who come down and help spanner. But to be honest, you're your own mechanic when you work on your own car. So you've just sort of got to, when you're driving, you really got to say, I think I've got to change this, or maybe that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, well, that's it. At the end of the day, any of the people that have spanned for me have done it out of the kindness of their heart. It's not like they're getting paid the big bucks to be there. So, you're trying to make sure they're not feeling like an absolute workhorse while you're just sitting back in the trailer relaxing. And then it's also for my own, peace of mind that I know what the car's exactly at, I'm the one that last tightened the wheel nut, so I can't blame anyone else but myself if a wheel's to fall off, that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, 100%. It's awesome when you've got people there to help you, but it's also really good to know that, especially when you do well, because then you can sit back and say, like, I was able to do this myself, and it just makes you feel a lot better. It can be a really good feeling sometimes, depending on the person. Some people, you might be humble and not think that, but I like to make sure that I know I'm proud of myself for what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Patting yourself on the back's what gives you drive to be better again. So nothing wrong with that.
And what sort of advice would you give to someone? Your 16-year-old self, what would you give that advice to him?
Probably I should stick through it a bit harder. Like when you're going through the hard spells of not winning the races or being so close and not quite getting it, it's just a part of the experience and learning about it. It's too easy to take it to heart and wonder, if it's you or the machine, or if it's what you should be doing or spending all your money in, or, time. But, just trust the process, because, everything happens for a reason. Sometimes I wish I went into speedway earlier, because it's just seeming to work for us at the moment. But at the same time, there's some valuable stuff I've learned through racing Kents that I wouldn't have got if I didn't do it. As a kid, the dream was to obviously have a go in a Formula Ford, and I managed to do it. So at least I can tick that off.
Yeah,
as well.
It's awesome that you've been able to sort of jump into sprint cars, because, like you were saying, in your early years, you sort of already really wanted to do it. You kind of knew that one day you wanted to make the transition.
Just having the people around that knew, like, my old boy racing the V's, and his dad was always on tarmac too. So everyone it's what we knew. It was just safer to be, you race what you know, and, all the kart, we never got right into speedway karts. We're always on, circuit racing too. So yeah, it was good to actually finally just bite the bullet and go, let's have a crack.
Yeah. Well, I got one more question for you. Have you got any sponsors or supporters you'd like to thank for sort of sticking along with you?
Yeah, so Truck Fix Australia, Wheeler Excavations, Wheeler Skip Bins, Avon Graphics. They've all been a great help throughout my whole Formula Ford and the transition into Speedway. I seriously, at some stages, couldn't have done it without them. They were the difference between us being on the track or not. So, yeah, I can't thank anyone that would help us out enough. And all those guys are absolute legends for jumping on board and helping us where they could.
Yeah, that's awesome, Josh. And I really appreciate you jumping on tonight. We had a great chat about, your racing career, and like the show, Grassroots Racer, everyone comes from a different story. A fourth generation racer, that's pretty awesome. So I think you should be pretty happy with yourself, what you've done. And I wish you the rest of the luck for this new season in the midgets. So yeah, just remember to drive fast and take chances safely, of course.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that and having us. It was good to have a chat.
Thank you.